This video has been sponsored by Whatnot. More on them at the end of the video. We all know the tale of the legendary beasts from 150 years ago in Ecruteak City, deep in the heart of the Johto region. However, Pokemon lore has been flipped on its head recently with the introduction of the Scarlet Book, which depicted what I will be calling for this video the Scarlet Beast, a creature from 200 years ago before the existence of Raikou, Entei, and Suicune that looks an awful lot like them. Now, with the release of Walking Wake and the presumed existence of future Pradox, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune as a trio, there is some explaining to do. And no, this video is not just an excuse to show off some nice artwork by Alex Allen, but I will say, dang, good job, Alex Allen. Go follow on Instagram. So let's start with what we know about Pradox Pokemon, and I've already done a whole video recently on exactly how Pradox Pokemon work, linked in the description. So Pradox Pokemon seem to sit somewhere between reality and imagination. People aren't quite sure or decided whether they are the result of the imagination of the professors or the people of Paldea, or whether they are somehow from alternate timelines, allowing the time travel aspect of the story to be real. All you need to know is that it is up for debate as to exactly how Pradox Pokemon link into their biological counterparts, and it seems that they are unrelated. However, I think for the legendary beasts of Johto, there might be a special exception here. They might be different to other Pradox Pokemon, similar to how Koraidon and Miraidon are similar to Cyclizar in a way that seems different to the other Pradox Pokemon's connection to their biological living counterparts. So if the Pokemon timeline is anything to go by, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are happening around 20 to 25 years after the events of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Gold and Silver is happening 150 years after the events of the Burnt Tower, which means Scarlet and Violet are happening about 175 years or 170 years after the events of the Burnt Tower. Don't worry, you don't need to keep that in mind. I'll bring up the numbers when they become important later, but for what you need to know right now is about 170 to 175 years before the events of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there were two towers in the Johto region in Ecruteak City. There was actually another tower previous to this that was in Goldenrod City that became dilapidated. It's where they built the Goldenrod Radio Tower, and that's why the director of the Radio Tower has, depending on the version of the game you're playing, a Rainbow Silverwing or Crystal/Clearbell to give you. It's possible at that point that this was Ho-Oh's roosting spot, explaining why it's called Goldenrod City because of the golden nature of Ho-Oh, and it being close to the ruins of Alph where Ho-Oh is depicted. Anyway, I digress. In Ecruteak City, 175 years prior to the events of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there were two towers, one in the east and one in the west. The western tower was the home of Lugia, and the eastern tower the one of Ho-Oh. However, and the story is different depending on the canon that you're looking at, whether that's the manga, the main series, the Pokemon Generations episode, or the games. A different set, but similar set of events happened. The tower was being burgled, it was a time of war, it was a freak thunderstorm, or perhaps if you believe the theories, the thunderstorm was created by the flapping of Lugia's wings, as referenced in the Pokedex entries. Either way, the tower in the west fell. It fell to a massive fire, thunderstorm, and rainstorm that came along and destroyed it. Lugia disappeared off to the Whirl Islands, but trapped inside were 3 Pokemon, and we still to this day do not know what those Pokemon are. If you look at the depiction in Pokemon Generations, it suggests that there may be something a little bit more like Houndour, although Pokemon theories have suggested the connection to the legendary beasts with Jolteon, Vaporeon, and Flareon. The Kimono Girls live in the Ecruteak City after all, and are big evolution users, but again, I digress. I believe the depictions in Generations to not be taken too seriously. I think they are just to be interpreted however you like. Nonetheless, the tower burned and the Pokemon were trapped inside, until Ho-Oh displayed powers that we haven't seen Ho-Oh display anywhere else in the series. Somehow, it revived these 3 creatures and brought new life in Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. But the odd thing is here is that this is happening 25 to 30 years after the depiction that appears in the Scarlet Book, the Scarlet Beast, a combination of all 3 of these Pokemon inspired by Heath's team going down into Area Zero in the Paldea region, a world away, seemingly completely disconnected. Heath's artist drew this inspired by the creatures that they saw down in Area Zero, and when the games first came out and we didn't have the DLC to work with, we were to take this as they were inspired by Pokemon like Iron Treads and Great Tusk. Of course, in Violet version this is different, there's Iron Leaves, and I'm not 100% sure on the story when it comes to the Swords of Justice, but maybe I'll talk about that in a future video. Now we know about the existence of Walking Wake. My belief is that the artist saw Walking Wake and perhaps 2 other Pokemon representing Entei and Raikou down there in Area Zero, and that those Pokemon then fled. They were moving so quickly that this is what Heath's artist came up with, a combination of all 3, the Scarlet Beast. So is it possible that these events are linked? I actually believe so. I believe that we're going to get Raikou and Entei's Pradox forms in parts 1 and 2 of the DLC. We have Walking Wake right now. Walking Wake right now is not actually available to you in the Paldea region. Yes, you can find them in the Terra Raid dens, but the Terra Raid dens seem to be creating Pokemon. The mightiest Pokemon that don't naturally exist in the region. Cinderace, Charizard, Greninja, these Pokemon aren't actually part of the Paldean Pokedex, and right now if you catch your one and only Walking Wake in the same vein, it doesn't have a Pokedex entry. Walking Wake is being reimagined here in the Paldea region for some reason. Similarly, both Part 2 and 3 talk about areas away from the main Paldea region. One of these is an artificial city in the sea, a sort of the Blueberry Academy. And separate to that, there is the land of Kitakami that I just released a video on, the deep lore behind that. That seems to be part of the overall Japanese country that appears in the Pokemon world. This is described by Professor Oak in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl as Hoenn, Johto, Kanto, and Sinnoh being part of the same country, likely inspired by their real-world Japanese counterparts. This is the Japanese country of the Pokemon world, and Kitakami is part of that. It's also interesting to note that the Walking Wake has the ability to walk on water when you throw it out of its Pokeball in the overworld. So my belief is that after their appearance in Area Zero 200 years ago, they left and ended up finding their way to this Japanese country in the Pokemon world. At the time, trade between these regions, Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, or as it was known then, Hisui, was pretty common. The Hisui culture was finally beginning to build up after the savage Pokemon of the Hisui region had been tamed by a hero around that time. Now, Jubilife Village was expanding. It wasn't just the Diamond and Pearl clans that were there, and the Celestica people who had been there for a long time had mostly died out. But most of the traversal for the last several hundred to thousand years was being done by a seafaring people who brought with them the lore and the culture of the areas they had visited, explaining why there is so many shared bits of architecture and culture across these regions. These ancient lore keepers were the Draconids whose home had been destroyed 2,000 years prior. Their traces can be seen all the way across this region. From the Regi Caves and Temples, the Sinjo ruins, the ruins of Alph, the Tanboy ruins, the Salacion ruins as well, the Cave of Origin, the Sky Pillar, the Spear Pillar, and the Embedded Tower in Johto. If you look close enough, it seems that these people have been traveling around exchanging information and the lore of the Pokemon world, sealing away great threats. They also seem to be very prolific with dragon Pokemon, with various dragon clans appearing in all of these regions. In Johto, we have the Dragon Clan to the north, we have Hassel, who now appears in the Paldea region. As well as that, there are the people of Celestic Town, of which both Drasna and Cynthia are descendants of this same clan, the clan that used to be where the ancient retreat was in Hisui. And the reason this is important is there's a second organization, a second group of people that seem very connected to all of this culture and infrastructure that's across all of these regions of the Pokemon world, the Kimono Girls. The Kimono Girls, of course, have their main base in Ecruteak City, and they are lore keepers of Lugia and Ho-Oh and the legendary beasts. They are the ones who brought the Togepi egg to Mr. Pokemon, and also those who gave Mr. Pokemon the Jade Orb, a direct connection to Rayquaza. They are the ones who tell the history and the story of the Johto region. It's also possible that the Diamond and Pearl clans of Hisui have their origins with the Kimono Girls, given the evolutions that have a high presence on both Adamant and Irida's team. However, being an evolution user alone isn't normally enough. We do think, though, for sure, that Valerie is a Kimono Girl, given the fact that she wears what's called a Furisode, which is a type of kimono. All of the trainers in her gym wear Furisodes. She is said to come from the Johto region, from a town where history is kept safe. This fact is actually confirmed in Pokemon Masters, and in the original Japanese game. In anime, she has a Kyoto dialect, which is what Ecruteak City is inspired by. And these Furisode or Kimono Girls across the world are still guarding ancient ruins today. They can be seen guarding the Cave of Origin as well as the Sky Pillar in Hoenn. So these lore keepers of the ancient Pokemon world take their vows and family legacies very, very seriously, still guarding all of the various ancient ruins and relics of the legendary Pokemon today. There is another area as well in the spin-off games that it looks like these people have traveled to defend ancient secrets, and that would be the Fjord region from Pokemon Ranger. There is Summertown, which is much like the Seafolk Village and Pacificdog Town, and above it, the Jungle Relic. It bears the same markings of Groudon and Kyogre and Rayquaza that we see in the Sky Pillar and the Cave of Origin. And similarly, there is also another temple that shares this legacy. But inside this temple, which is guarded by ancient dragon trials that only Dragon Masters should be able to deal with, you as a Pokemon Ranger will find yourself face to face with a statue of Entei, of all Pokemon. And Entei, Raikou, and Suicune will make their way further into the region and become antagonists in the game. Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh are all deeply tied together, whether it's with unknown ruins, the legendary beasts, Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, heck, even the Latis. But I digress. This is simply to illustrate that unlike the other regions of the Pokemon world, whose lore and legends seem to be relatively separate to one another, apart from perhaps the Kalos regions and Galar and Paldea, which are all relatively close together, that these Japanese-inspired Pokemon regions really do seem to have cross-contamination across their legends. In fact, in almost every single game since Generation 1, if Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno appear, so too does Lugia. The exceptions really being Kalos, where the Sea Spirit's Den appears, this being in Azure Bay, a direct reference to Lugia itself, and being pretty close in geographical terms to the Crown Tundra, which is where, yet again, another Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno appear, or in the Sinnoh region, where the birds are roaming. Lugia doesn't appear in the Sinnoh region, but it does show that these birds have an ability and a propensity to roam and fly about the wider Pokemon world. So too is the case for Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, though, who typically appear alongside Ho-Oh no matter which game you're looking at. But to fully understand their connection to Ho-Oh, I think we need to go back to that day 170 years before the events of Scarlet and Violet in the Johto region when that tower burnt down. I believe the 3 Pokemon trapped inside were Walking Wake and 2 other Pradox Pokemon that matched Entei and Raikou. If Walking Wake is anything to go by with its water dragon typing, I expect the Entei to be fire dragon and the Raikou to be electric dragon type. Pokemon of deep interest and concern to the Kimono people and dragon clans of the Johto region at that time. I believe that these Pokemon were trapped in the tower. Perhaps they were even the reason for the tower to fall. Perhaps they aggravated and attacked Lugia. We can't know for sure, but these Pokemon perished. And then to revive them and to end this madness, Ho-Oh appeared, revived them and transformed them anew. But it did so using not its own power, but instead the power of the unknown. I previously mentioned that Ho-Oh appears in the ruins of Alph depicted alongside them, and I believe it wielded their mighty power. Their power to create things out of crystal, as we see in the 3rd movie where they create an Entei directly using exactly this power. The unknown have the ability of imagination and reality warping. We even see something that looks not too dissimilar to the unknown on the headgear of the Draconids in the manga, but I digress, that's just a side point. The unknown, whose powers of creation seem to be about tapping into the mind of another being, whether in the case of Arceus helping it create Giratina, Dialga, and Palkia, either at the beginning of time or in the Sinjar Ruins event, or in this case, perhaps tapping into the mind of Ho-Oh or the people of Ecruteak City, these Pradox Pokemon were transformed, perhaps in the image of Jolteon, Vaporeon, and Flareon, common icons in Ecruteak City, or perhaps in the image of the Scarlet Beast, which was entering the public consciousness at that time. At this point in time, the Scarlet and Violet book had been out for around 20 to 30 years. And as I've mentioned before, by seeing a book that looks to me to be a lot like the Violet book in Kogita's Hut, an asset in the game that seems to be completely unique, not anywhere else. I can't not see this as a direct reference. We know that the Scarlet and Violet book had made its way to this Japan Pokemon region. In fact, it would probably have been through the Kitakame exchange program that we're going to see in the DLC. And so these 3 Pradox Pokemon that had appeared in Ecruteak City one day found their way to this tower through some incident or another. It's been very vague. The tower burnt down, and in the image of the Scarlet Beast, which was in the minds and imagination of the people at that time, or perhaps in the image of Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon that would also be in the minds of the people of that area, these Pokemon were given new life. Suicune first, as in Crystal version, the sages that used Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon to defend the remaining tower actually mentioned that Suicune has a special connection to the unknown, perhaps through the crystal on its head. And these Pokemon follow Ho-Oh everywhere across the Pokemon world, feeling very indebted to it, either as individuals, one of a kind, or perhaps as a new species of legendary Pokemon, but now for the first time, actually real. Of course, you might wonder how this would work in a timeline that focuses on Pokemon Violet version, but I suspect the 2 timelines are very connected, and this whole process of creation through imagination or alternate timelines, the Pokemon still exist in each game. The past Pradox Pokemon can be traded into Violet and the future ones into Scarlet, so I do wonder what the story would be with the Swords of Justice. But now given new life, the 3 legendary beasts follow Ho-Oh around, the Pokemon they feel indebted to who granted them new life through the wishes of the people of Ecruteak City who recreated these Pokemon in the images of Pokemon they were more familiar with. less monstrous Pokemon. I love Pokemon Legends, and I love these Pokemon Legends cards of Ho-Oh, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune in their various combinations. I think they're absolutely beautiful and some of my favorites, and I'm going to be trying to hunt these down over on today's sponsor, Whatnot. Whatnot, you've heard me talking about it before. It is a live buying and selling platform for Pokemon collectibles, for all collectibles actually, whether you're into Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Dragon Ball or anything else. You can download it today using the link at the top of the description and come along and check out some of the shows, including my upcoming show featuring the Scarlet and Violet Pokemon cards. When you come along and you witness an auction happening, what's going to happen is the time is going to count down as it would with any auction. However, when the auction hits 10 seconds remaining and a bid is placed, the timer will then reset back to 10 seconds, always allowing people to get in the bids they want and no one is bid sniping. And everyone's happy with the price they've paid. It means you can get hold of some absolutely incredible deals over there, or perhaps you've got some of those legend Pokemon cards I'm looking for and you figure you might put some up for sale. It's a great way to make some quick cash and meet some amazing members of the Pokemon card collecting community. I think that's one of my favorite elements about it. It's just getting to chat to people and meet people who are part of this buying and selling community, and everyone's just trying to help each other out in completing their collections. So if that's something that sounds like it would benefit you, click the link at the top of the description, head on over to my account, make sure you favorite my next show, the Scarlet and Violet show, so you know that you're following it, and you'll get a notification when it happens, when the new Scarlet and Violet Pokemon card sets come out. There is some incredible artwork coming in this upcoming set, including the full arts of Iron Treads and Great Tusks. I cannot wait to start collecting Pradox Pokemon as well. And if you scan the QR code that's been on screen to download the app for the first time today, you'll get £10 off of your first purchase, like credit on your account, so you can get some Pokemon cards for free. Thank you all for watching, thank you to Whatnot for sponsoring this video, and of course, soar high Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master.
Just the biggest thank you to those of you who are supporting this channel on Patreon, and a special thank you to the big patrons of the month, Jedruben, Charmander, Anzabal, Anthony Lee, The Elgator, and Michael Hornshoe. Thank you so much.